It was a humid Thursday evening in downtown Brooklyn, the kind of night where the city smells like rain on hot pavement and pretzels from the corner cart. James stood frozen on the sidewalk in his perfectly tailored navy coat, holding a plain paper bag with 2 cheap hot dogs and a can of soda. His driver waited 10 feet away in a blacked-out SUV, but James did not move. His face looked like someone had just told him the entire family fortune was gone. Elena had just walked away without turning around. No dramatic tears, no shouting match in public, just a quiet sentence from her lips that cut deeper than any argument they had ever had. She said the words and disappeared into the subway entrance like a ghost. Everyone who knew them thought they were the perfect couple, the billionaire and the curator who somehow made it work. So why did she leave him standing there, clutching street food like it was evidence in a crime scene? The answer is darker than any luxury scandal you have ever heard. And it starts with the moment I decided to show a generational billionaire what real life actually felt like. Let me take you back 6 months earlier so you can understand how we even reached that sidewalk. I was 28, still grinding as a junior curator at a small gallery in Chelsea, paying off student loans with every extra shift I could grab. My apartment in Bed-Stuy was tiny, the kind where you could hear the neighbors arguing through the walls, but it was mine. I loved my work. I loved discovering artists no one else had noticed yet. James walked into the gallery one rainy afternoon during a quiet show of street photographers. He was not loud or flashy. Tall, quiet, with that old money posture that comes from generations of boarding schools and private jets. His family name opened doors before he even spoke. He stopped in front of one particular image, a simple black and white shot of people sharing food on a park bench, and asked me what I saw in it. We talked for over an hour. By the time the gallery closed, he had my number, and I had this strange feeling that something was about to change. Our first date was exactly what you would expect from a generational billionaire who had dated models, socialites and heiresses before me. A private car took me to a rooftop restaurant where the chef came out personally. The wine was older than I was, and the bill never appeared because it was simply handled. James ordered for both of us, complimented my dress, and asked polite questions about my job. At the end, he handed me a small velvet box with diamond earrings inside. Beautiful, expensive, and exactly what every girl before me had received on date 1. I could see it in his eyes. He was waiting for the usual reaction, the grateful gasp, the immediate text to friends showing off the gift. Instead, I smiled, closed the box gently, and said thank you, but I couldn't accept something so valuable this early. His eyebrows lifted just a fraction. That was the first time anyone had ever turned down one of his presents. He recovered quickly, laughed it off, but I caught the flicker of suspicion. In his world, women took the gifts. They always did. The next few weeks followed the same pattern he knew by heart. He tried to sweep me into his lifestyle the way he had with everyone else. Weekend trips to his family estate in the Hamptons, tickets to sold-out Broadway shows in the best seats. Shopping appointments where personal buyers waited with racks of designer pieces. He behaved exactly like he always had. Lavish gestures, constant availability of luxury, and that quiet assumption that money would eventually win me over completely. I could feel his guard up the entire time. He was raised to believe every woman who got close was measuring his bank account first and his heart second. His mother had drilled it into him since he was a teenager. Protect the fortune. Never trust the smile. Every girl wants the presence, the lifestyle, the status, never the man underneath. He never said those words out loud to me, but I saw it in the small things. The way he watched my reaction to every gift. The way his security team quietly checked my background before our third date. The way he tested me with offhand comments about gold diggers at parties. It was exhausting to watch, and it was the first real disadvantage I noticed about dating a billionaire. The constant invisible wall. No matter how kind he seemed on the surface, part of him was always waiting for me to prove I was just like the rest. That is when I decided to do something different. I stopped letting him default to the luxury script. One Friday evening, instead of letting him send the car, I texted him a simple address in Brooklyn and told him to meet me there wearing jeans and sneakers. No driver, no entourage if possible. He showed up looking slightly confused, like a tourist who had wandered into the wrong neighborhood. I took him to a tiny food cart on the corner that served the best tacos in the borough for $5 each. We stood on the sidewalk eating them with plastic forks while trucks rumbled past and kids played stickball in the street. James took one bite and actually paused. He admitted he had never eaten street food standing up in his life. I laughed and told him this was real Brooklyn, not the version in magazines. For the first time, I saw a crack in his armor. He looked almost boyish, surprised that something so ordinary could taste so good. But later that night, when I refused the diamond bracelet he tried to give me as a thank you, I caught him watching me with that familiar suspicion again. In his mind, I was playing a long game. No one turns down luxury twice unless they are after something bigger later. The disadvantages started stacking up faster after that. Dating James meant living under a microscope. His security team knew every place we went. Paparazzi sometimes waited outside my gallery even though I begged for privacy. Friends from my old life slowly stopped inviting me to casual things because they assumed I was always busy in some penthouse. The isolation crept in quietly. But the biggest disadvantage was the emotional distance. James could not fully relax. Every time I tried to show him something simple and fun, his brain went straight to distrust. I took him to a free outdoor movie screening in the park one weekend. We sat on a blanket I brought from home, shared popcorn from a paper bag, and laughed at the old comedy on the giant screen. He seemed to enjoy it. He even put his arm around me and for a moment looked like a normal guy on a normal date. But the next day, his assistant called to schedule a private jet to Paris as if to balance the scales. When I said I did not want to go, he grew quiet. Later, I overheard him on a phone call with his brother. He said something about how I was different, but he still could not shake the feeling that all women eventually wanted the presence and the money, not the real him. His voice carried that lifetime of training. Generations of lawyers and prenups and family warnings had wired him to expect betrayal. It made my chest ache because I could see he wanted to believe me. He just did not know how. Another dramatic twist came a few weeks later when we were supposed to attend one of his family charity galas. He had already sent a stylist with a gown that cost more than my rent for a year. I politely returned it and showed up in a simple black dress I had owned for ages. The evening was tense. His mother watched me the entire night like I was a puzzle she needed to solve. At one point, James pulled me aside and asked why I kept rejecting everything he tried to give me. I told him the truth. I wanted to know him, not his wallet. I wanted us to build something real, starting with small things like cheap dinners and walks in the park instead of always hiding behind luxury. He listened, nodded, but I saw the wall go back up immediately. From his perspective, this was the oldest trick. Act like you do not care about money, so he lowers his guard, and then the requests start. It was not his fault entirely. He had been raised that way since birth. Every ex before me had eventually taken the gifts, the trips, the lifestyle upgrade. None of them had ever tried to teach him how to enjoy a $5 taco on a sidewalk. The mystery of our story really began to deepen around that time. I pushed harder to show him real life because I genuinely cared. I took him to a hole-in-the-wall pizza place in my neighborhood at midnight after a long day. We sat at a sticky table sharing one large pie and talking about our childhoods. He told me stories about boarding school and pressure to be perfect. I told him about growing up with a single mom who worked 2 jobs. For a few hours, the billionaire disappeared and he was just James, laughing at my terrible jokes and stealing the last slice. But the next morning, a courier arrived at my door with a new car as a surprise. When I refused it and sent it back, the dramatic twist hit. One of his close friends pulled me aside at the next event and warned me that James was starting to question everything. He had told the friend I was either the most genuine woman he had ever met or the smartest player he had ever encountered. The suspicion was eating him alive. That was the moment I realized dating a generational billionaire came with a disadvantage no one warns you about. You can try to show him the real world all you want, but if he was raised to see every woman as a potential threat to the family fortune, your kindness itself becomes suspicious. The curiosity only grew from there. Why did someone who seemed to enjoy the simple moments still pull away every time I refused luxury? Why did he keep testing me with bigger and bigger gifts even after I explained why they made me uncomfortable? Then, I started noticing how lonely he actually was beneath the armor. He wanted real connection so badly, But the voices from his upbringing whispered louder. Every girl just wants presents. Every girl will eventually ask for money. Never let them close enough to steal anything. It created this heartbreaking push and pull that left both of us exhausted. And then came the night that set up everything that would follow. We had spent a perfect low-key evening walking across the Brooklyn Bridge, eating ice cream from a corner truck, talking until the stars came out. James seemed lighter than ever. He even kissed me and said maybe I was right about simple things being better. But the very next day, his security team quietly increased surveillance on me. I found out later through a mutual friend. The distrust had won again. That was the beginning of the end, though I didn't know it yet. I will reveal the first major dramatic twist that made me question everything I was trying to build with him. It was the beginning of a slow unraveling that neither of us saw coming until it was too late. The next morning, a courier arrived at my apartment with a single envelope. Inside was a handwritten note on thick cream paper. Just 4 words. I am sorry. Please talk. No signature needed. I knew the handwriting. I stared at it for a long time before putting it in a drawer without replying. The silence between us stretched into days, then weeks. But the story did not stop there. It twisted in ways that made the disadvantages of dating a generational billionaire feel even heavier. Let me rewind a little to the months leading up to that goodbye, so you understand the build-up. After those first simple dates, the tacos, the park movies, the midnight pizza, James started trying harder in the only way he knew how. Every time I showed him something real and low-key, he responded with something extravagant the very next day. It became a pattern so predictable it almost felt scripted. I took him to a free jazz concert in Prospect Park, where we sat on the grass with strangers sharing a blanket and listening to saxophone notes float over the trees. He smiled more that night than I had ever seen. He even clapped along and whispered that he had forgotten music could feel like this without a VIP section. But the following afternoon, his driver delivered a vintage turntable system worth more than my annual salary, along with a crate of rare vinyl records curated by some specialist in London. I sent it back immediately with a polite note explaining that the concert had been perfect exactly because it cost nothing. His reply came via text. I thought you would like it. I want to give you nice things. That was the core of the problem. James simply didn't know how to show his feelings without presents and money. He had been raised in a world where affection was measured in carats and commas. His mother once told him as a boy that the surest way to a woman's heart was through thoughtful generosity, meaning expensive, thoughtful generosity. His father sealed deals with watches and private island weekends. Every relationship he had witnessed growing up ended with someone walking away richer. So, when he felt something real stirring for me, something beyond the surface polish, he panicked. The only language he spoke fluently was luxury. Refusing his gifts felt like refusing him. In his mind, if I didn't want the jewelry, the trips, the surprise experiences, then maybe I didn't want him at all. Or worse, maybe I was holding out for something even bigger later. The suspicion never fully left him. It lived in the background like static on an old radio. One dramatic twist happened during what should have been a perfect low-key weekend. I suggested we skip the Hamptons house and instead take the train to Coney Island like regular people. He agreed surprisingly fast. We walked the boardwalk, ate fried clams from a paper tray, rode the cyclone until we were dizzy and screaming like teenagers. For hours he seemed lighter, freer, almost normal. He held my hand without thinking about who might see. He laughed at the seagulls stealing fries. At sunset, we sat on the sand watching the waves, and he turned to me and said quietly that this was the best day he could remember in years. I believed him. His eyes looked softer, unguarded. But then his phone buzzed. A message from his assistant, confirming a helicopter pickup for the next morning, to fly us to a vineyard in Napa for a tasting he had booked months earlier, as a surprise. I told him no. I wanted to stay here, ride the subway home, eat leftover clams for dinner. His face changed in an instant. The softness vanished, replaced by that familiar guarded look. He said, "Fine, we can stay." But the tone was clipped. That night back in my apartment, he tried to hand me a small box. Inside was a bracelet made of ocean-inspired sapphires. I closed it and set it on the table. James asked why I kept doing this. I explained again that the day had been special because it was ours, not because of helicopters or jewels. He stared at the bracelet, like it had betrayed him. Then he said something that hit hard. If I can't give you things, what am I supposed to do? How do I show you I care? The question hung there heavily. He genuinely did not know. Money and presents were his love language because they were the only ones he had ever been taught. Without them, he felt exposed, naked, vulnerable. And vulnerability terrified him more than any boardroom failure. His upbringing had drilled in one unbreakable rule. Protect the fortune at all costs. Never let anyone get close enough to take it. Every woman before me had accepted the gifts, eventually asked for more, or simply left with a generous settlement. None had ever pushed him to exist without the safety net of wealth. So when I refused, he interpreted it as rejection. Not of the bracelet, but of him. The dramatic irony was crushing. I was trying to show him a real connection, and in doing so, I was making him feel poorer than ever. Another twist came a month later at a small dinner with his closest friends. These were people who had known him since childhood, sons and daughters of other old money families. They treated me politely, but with that same subtle distance I had felt before. During dessert, James excused himself to take a call. While he was gone, one of his friends leaned in and asked quietly how I was handling the James special. When I looked confused, she explained, "He gives gifts to test people. The bigger the gift, the bigger the test. If you take them, you fail because you are just like the rest. If you refuse them, he thinks you are playing a longer game, waiting for the real payout. Either way, you lose." She said it almost kindly, like she was warning me out of pity. I sat there stunned, realizing the entire relationship had been one extended test I never signed up for. When James returned, he caught the tail end of the conversation. His face tightened. Later in the car, he asked what she said. I told him the truth. He went silent for the rest of the ride. That night, he didn't try to give me anything. Instead, he sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, and said he didn't know how to do this without the usual tools. He admitted that every time I showed him something simple, he enjoyed it more than he expected. But then the fear rushed back. What if this was all an act? What if one day, I asked for half his trust fund, or a stake in the family companies? The words came out raw and almost painful. I told him I never would. He nodded, but the doubt stayed in his eyes. The disadvantages piled higher with every attempt to bridge the gap. Dating James meant constant emotional whiplash. One moment, he would let his guard down, laughing over cheap coffee in a diner booth. Next, he would retreat behind another extravagant gesture, as if to remind himself he still had control. I started feeling like I was in a relationship with two people. The James who craved real connection, and the James who had been conditioned to suspect it. The isolation grew worse, too. My friends stopped asking me to hang out because they assumed I was always in some unreachable world. His world, meanwhile, remained closed to me. His family never fully warmed up. His mother once asked over brunch if I had a prenup in mind yet. When I said no, she smiled thinly and changed the subject. The message was clear. I was temporary until proven otherwise. Then came the twist that shifted everything. James surprised me one evening by showing up at my gallery unannounced. No driver, no security detail, just him in jeans and a hoodie like he was trying to blend in. He had brought nothing expensive. Instead, he carried 2 paper cups of coffee from the corner bodega and a small sketch pad. He said he wanted to see my world on my terms. We walked through the exhibits together. I explained the pieces to the artists and the stories behind them. For once, he listened without interrupting or trying to buy something on the spot. At the end, he opened the sketch pad and showed me a rough pencil drawing of the Brooklyn Bridge we had walked across weeks earlier. It was simple, amateur, but honest. He said he drew it from memory because that night meant something to him. No money involved. Just effort. I felt hope flicker for the first time in months. Maybe he was learning. Maybe the lessons were sinking in. But hope has a way of twisting too. The very next day, his lawyer called me directly. James had instructed him to prepare paperwork. Not a prenup exactly, but a trust document that would set aside a fixed amount for me in case things ended. It was framed as protection for both of us. I refused to even look at it. When I confronted James, he looked exhausted, He said he was trying to meet me halfway. If I didn't take gifts, at least let him secure my future. So I never had to worry. I told him that was the problem. I didn't want security from his money. I wanted trust from his heart. He stared at me for a long moment, then said quietly that he didn't know if he could give that. Not fully. Not after everything he had been taught. The fear was too deep. Generations of caution had carved it into him. That conversation left a crack that never fully healed. The disadvantages became impossible to ignore after that. Dating a generational billionaire meant loving someone who could not fully love back without a safety net. It meant constant proof that your feelings were real while his remained locked behind suspicion. It meant watching him struggle to express care in the only ways he knew, only to have those ways rejected, because they came with strings you never asked for. The push and pull exhausted both of us. I started pulling away more often, needing space to breathe. James started retreating into his familiar world of deals and distance. The sidewalk with the hot dogs was coming. But before that final moment, there was one more dramatic twist that pushed us to the edge. It arrived in the form of a single overheard phone call. I had gone to his penthouse one evening to return a book he had lent me months earlier about street photography. He was in his study on speakerphone with the door slightly ajar. I paused in the hallway, not intending to eavesdrop, but the words stopped me cold. One of his closest friends, the same one who had warned me about the James special, was laughing on the line. So how is the experiment going? Still no cracks in the armor. James sighed, the sound heavy. She is holding steady. Refused the bracelet, the car, the vineyard weekend. I even tried the low-key stuff she likes. Park movies, bodega coffee. Nothing. The friend chuckled. 6 months in, and she has not bitten. You might actually lose this one, bro. The Bordeaux was looking safe in my cellar. James didn't laugh back. There was a long pause. I don't know if I want to win anymore, he said quietly. The game stopped feeling fun a while ago. Then end it. Tell her. Or keep playing and see how long she lasts. Either way, the bet stands until one of you folds. I backed away silently, heart hammering. The book slipped from my fingers and hit the marble floor with a soft thud. James appeared in the doorway, eyes wide when he saw me. Elena. I didn't wait for explanations. I turned and left the penthouse, the elevator ride down feeling endless. Outside, I walked blocks without direction until I ended up at the familiar Brooklyn sidewalk near the subway entrance. The same cart was open, the same smell of grilled onions and mustard hanging in the air. I bought 2 hot dogs, sat on the curb, and waited. Not because I expected him to come, but because it felt like the only honest place left. He arrived 20 minutes later. No car, no entourage. Just James walking fast, hands in pockets, head down. He stopped when he saw me. You heard. I nodded. He sat beside me far enough that our shoulders didn't touch. The hot dog sat between us untouched. It started as a stupid joke, he said. After our first few dates, they teased me. Said you were playing the long game. Said no one turns down luxury forever, unless they are after something bigger. I got defensive. Told them you were genuine. Told them I could prove it by giving you exactly what you asked. For simple, real moments, and you would still walk away empty-handed. No gifts, no asks. They bet I couldn't pull it off. A case of vintage Bordeaux bragging rights, the usual nonsense. I agreed because I wanted to be right about you. So every taco, every park bench, every refusal, it was all feeding their scoreboard. At first, yes. But it changed. Quickly, the bet became background noise. I stopped thinking about it when we were together. I started craving those nights because they felt clean. No performance, no agenda. Just you and me. I told myself the wager didn't matter anymore. But it did matter. It was always there in the room with us. Every time you watched me turn down a gift, you were still collecting evidence. For them, for yourself. He rubbed his face with both hands. I know. I should have shut it down the second I realized I cared. I should have told you immediately. I was afraid. Afraid, if I admitted it, you would see me as just another rich guy playing games. Afraid, it would prove their point. You did prove their point, James. Not because I have a price. Because you let them turn me into a variable in their little experiment. You let them bet on whether a regular person could be bought. You reduced every honest feeling I had to data points. He looked at me, then eyes raw. I ended it. Tonight. After you left the penthouse, I called them. Told them the bet was off. Told them to keep the wine. Burn the scorecard. I didn't care. I told them you were never part of it. That I was the idiot who made you part of it. The words hung between us. A train rumbled below, vibrating the curb. It is too late, I said. The damage is done. You can't unhear a bet. You can't unknow that every time I thought we were connecting, part of you was still measuring it against a wager. I never wanted the bet to define us, but it did. From the start, silence settled again, thicker than before. What now? He asked softly. Nothing. There is no now. I can't be with someone who lets his friends gamble on my heart, even if he regrets it later. I can't wonder every quiet moment whether it was real or just another test I passed. I stood up, brushing my hands on my jeans. The hot dog I had bought for him sat untouched. Elena, wait. I shook my head. Don't send anything. Don't call. Don't try to explain again. You already showed me everything I needed to see. I turned toward the subway stairs. He stayed seated, watching me go. At the top, I paused, looked back once. He had not moved. The paper bag with the cold hot dog rested beside him like evidence left at the scene. I walked down into the station. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I swiped my card. The train pulled in. I stepped on. The doors closed. The car lurched forward, carrying me away from the sidewalk, from the hot dogs, from the man who had almost learned what real felt like before he ruined it. After I walked away that evening, James didn't chase me down the subway stairs or call my phone 100 times like a man in a movie would. He stood there for what felt like forever, according to the friend who spotted him later and told me about it. Then he climbed into the SUV and disappeared into the night. That was the last time I saw James. Months later, the questions still drift in quiet moments. Did he ever walk past that cart again? Did he ever eat a hot dog standing up without thinking of me? Did his friends shrug off the lost bet? Or did they tease him about folding too soon? Did he ever tell anyone the full story? Or did he bury it under more deals and distance? I do not have answers, and I no longer need them. What stays with me is a clearer truth than ever before. Old money people, the ones wrapped in generations of caution and control, can forget the most basic fact. Regular people are people. Not experiments, not bets, not puzzles to be solved or wagers to be won. We have hearts that break when reduced to proof points. We have dignity that does not bend for Bordeaux or bragging rights. We want to be loved for who we are, not tested for what we might take. James almost remembered that. For a few honest moments, he almost lived it. But the bet reminded him and reminded me that some worlds are built on suspicion so deep it turns even kindness into strategy. I kept walking forward. New shows, new friends, new dates with people who never once made me feel like a subject in someone else's game. The sidewalk became just another corner in Brooklyn. The hot dog cart still sells the same food to the same people. Life moved on. But every once in a while, when I smell grilled onions on the breeze, I remember. Not with anger. Not with longing. With the quiet certainty that I chose correctly. I chose to protect my own heart when someone else treated it like a side bet. And that choice, no luxury, no apology, no vintage wine could ever outweigh. Thanks for watching.